In 1972, Scotland Yard issued a warning that sounded less like a police report and more like a sales brochure. They officially dubbed the Ford Transit Britain's most wanted. The statistics were staggering. If a high-stakes bank raid was taking place in London, there was a 95% chance the getaway vehicle was a Transit. It was the only machine on the road with the performance of a getaway car and the reinforced backbone of a freight train. It didn't just outrun the law, it outworked every other vehicle in the country, carrying the weight of both stolen loot and legitimate commerce with equal, cold-blooded efficiency. But the criminals were merely the early adopters of a revolution. They were the first to realize that this steel box was about to change the way the entire human race traded. This isn't just a documentary about a van. It is the autopsy of an industrial icon. The story of how a secret engineering war created the literal backbone of world trade. To understand the transit's impact, you have to visualize the grinding misery of trade before 1965. Post-war Britain and Europe were in a frantic state of rebuilding. Yet the circulatory system of trade was dangerously clogged. If you were a tradesman in Manchester, a baker in London, or a builder in Liverpool, you were trapped in what can only be described as logistical purgatory. You had two choices for transport, and frankly, both were miserable excuses for a workhorse. On one hand, you could opt for a small, car-based van. These were essentially family saloons with the back seats ripped out and a few plywood panels bolted in. They were fine for delivering a few pints of milk, but the moment you loaded them with a real day's work, the suspension would groan, the leaf springs would flatten, and you'd be lucky to make it up a modest hill without the engine overheating. They lacked the spine for serious industry. On the other hand, there was the heavy truck. These were massive, lumbering beasts that required the strength of a heavyweight boxer just to steer. They were physically incapable of navigating the narrow, soot-stained Victorian alleyways that made up the heart of Britain's commercial districts. Because the middle didn't exist, business remained local and painfully slow. Ford's existing solution, the Thames 400E, was a dangerous compromise. The driver sat directly over the front axle, and if you braked too hard while empty, the rear wheels could actually lift off the ground. The economy was waiting for a bridge between the car and the truck. But first, Ford had to survive a civil war within its own engineering teams. The birth of the Transit wasn't a celebratory handshake, it was a boardroom brawl. In the early 1960s, Ford was a house divided by the English Channel. Ford of Britain and Ford of Germany were operating like two entirely different companies, and they quite frankly loathed the idea of sharing their secrets. The British team, based in Dagenham, was fiercely protective of their rugged, no-nonsense approach to utility. Meanwhile, the German team in Cologne was obsessed with precision, high-speed stability, and engineering finesse. They were building two different vans for the same market, wasting millions in the process. Henry Ford II, a man who didn't suffer fools or corporate bloat, had seen enough. He watched his European divisions waste resources developing competing products that were both underperforming on the global stage. He issued a brutal ultimatum that would change automotive history. Stop competing and start collaborating. He demanded a world van, one single platform that could dominate every market, from the cobblestone streets of London to the high-speed stretches of the German Autobahn. This forced marriage was codenamed Project Redcap. It was a secret engineering war conducted behind closed doors, often filled with heated arguments and cultural clashes. The British engineers argued that the van needed to be a tank. It had to withstand the chronic, overloading culture of UK tradesmen, where a one-ton van was often expected to carry 2 tons of bricks without snapping in half. The Germans, however, refused to compromise on aerodynamics and cooling. They wanted a vehicle that could sit at 70 miles per hour all day on the motorway without the engine overheating. The tension was thick. Every design meeting was a battle over millimeters. But as the friction increased, it polished the design into something revolutionary. They realized that by combining British toughness with German high-speed dynamics, they were creating a hybrid DNA that no competitor, not Volkswagen, not Bedford, not Mercedes, could touch. Project Redcap was the moment Ford stopped being a collection of national branches and became a global superpower. By the time the first prototypes were hidden under tarpaulins for testing, the engineers realized they had accidentally created the Goldilocks of the automotive world. The Transit's true genius wasn't just ruggedness, it was a radical piece of geometry that redefined global logistics. For decades, van design followed a lazy rule. Either the engine sat under the seat, roasting the driver, or it occupied a long nose at the front, which wasted precious cargo space. Ford's engineers, fresh from their corporate civil war, decided to do neither. They pioneered the short snout design. By utilizing a compact 60-degree V4 engine, the Essex in Britain and the Cologne in Germany, they were able to push the entire mechanical heart of the vehicle forward. The engine measured just 20 inches in length. This created a stubby nose that acted as a protective buffer for the driver. But more importantly, it unlocked a vast, flat cargo floor. For the first time, a commercial vehicle was truly designed from the inside out, prioritizing pallets over engine bays. This led to the wide-track revolution. The Transit was significantly wider than any of its rivals, such as the narrow Bedford CA. Ford realized that the world was moving towards standardized shipping, and they engineered the wheel arches to a precise measurement, 1,392 millimeters. It may sound like a dry, technical detail, but it was the eureka moment of 20th century trade. This specific width allowed a standard industrial pallet to slide perfectly between the rear wheel arches with room to spare. Suddenly, the factory, the warehouse, and the van spoke the same language. But it wasn't just about space. It was about the civilized chassis. Because the Transit borrowed front suspension components and steering gear from Ford's passenger car range, it didn't drive like a tractor. For the first time, a tradesman could spend 12 hours behind the wheel without his spine being shaken to dust by road vibrations. It was wide, it was aggressive, and it was ready to put the competition out of business. Success was ultimately down to the maths of versatility. Ford realized early on that a plumber had very different needs than an ambulance driver, a police officer, or an ice cream vendor. To truly conquer the market, they didn't just launch a van, they launched a modular ecosystem. In the 1960s, it was practically unheard of for a manufacturer to offer such a staggering array of configurations from a single base. From the short wheelbase 80 to the heavy-duty long wheelbase 150, the Transit could be adapted into over 18 different body styles straight from the factory. This flexibility gave birth to some of the most specialized vehicles on the road. The Transit quickly became the default chassis for national recovery fleets, the backbone of the postal service, and even the platform for mobile libraries that brought books to remote villages. In 1970, enterprising rickshaw operators in Hong Kong purchased a fleet of 200 Transits, finding them the only vehicles nimble enough to navigate the world's most densely populated island while carrying massive loads up steep tropical hills. Ford's inside-out design philosophy meant the Transit was a blank canvas. Whether you were hauling bricks, saving lives, or selling soft serve, the Transit proved that versatility was the greatest currency in trade. By the mid-1970s, the Ford Transit had stopped being a mere vehicle and started being a social class. In the United Kingdom and across Europe, a new figure had emerged on the cultural landscape, the white van man. This wasn't just a driver behind a wheel, it was a symbol of the self-made entrepreneur. Before the Transit, the working class was largely tied to the factory floor. But the Transit offered a path to independence that hadn't existed since the Industrial Revolution. Armed with a toolkit, a ladder, and a Transit parked on the driveway, a tradesman could suddenly bypass the middleman. The van was their office, their lunchroom, their warehouse, and their billboard. It democratized the economy, shifting power from massive, faceless corporations back to the individual. It was the chariot of the gig economy, 40 years before the term was even invented. This cultural shift created a unique bond between the machine and the owner. To the white van man, the transit wasn't just a tool, it was a partner in survival. It was the vehicle that allowed him to put his children through school and pay off a mortgage. It became a ubiquitous part of the British morning ritual, the distinctive thwack of the sliding door echoing through suburban streets at 5 in the morning, the smell of diesel fumes, and a thermos of tea sitting on the passenger seat. While the average tradesman was concerned with payload and fuel economy, Ford's marketing department was obsessed with something else: speed. In 1971, they performed one of the greatest marketing stunts in automotive history. They took the chassis of a Ford GT40, the car that famously humiliated Ferrari at Le Mans, and dropped a Transit Mark I body on top of it. This was the birth of the supervan. Powered by a 5-litre V8 engine, it could hit a top speed of over 150 miles per hour. It made its debut at the Brands Hatch race circuit, screeching around corners on racing slicks and lifting its inside wheels like a professional sports car. The message to the public was clear. If our engineering could handle a GT40 engine at triple-digit speeds, it could certainly handle your morning delivery route. But Ford didn't stop there. They turned the supervan into a multi-generational saga of overkill. In 1984, they built Supervan 2 using the chassis of a Ford C100 Group C race car, clocked at 174 miles per hour. By the time Supervan 3 arrived in 1994, featuring a 730 horsepower Formula One engine, the Transit had achieved a legendary status in motorsport that no other commercial vehicle could touch. Today, that legacy lives on in the Supervan 4.2, an all-electric monster with over 2,000 horsepower. If the 1970s gave the Transit its soul, the 1980s gave it its armor. To win the unwavering loyalty of the million-mile drivers, Ford knew they needed an engine that could survive total contempt. In 1984, they introduced a masterpiece of mechanical honesty, the 2.5-litre DI, or direct injection diesel engine. To a modern ear, the DI was not a subtle machine. It was loud, agricultural, and unapologetically unrefined. When you turned the key on a cold morning, it didn't just start. It woke up the entire neighborhood with a rhythmic, percussive clatter that vibrated the wing mirrors until they were a blur. But to a business owner, that noise was the sound of a license to print money. The DI was virtually unkillable. Because it did away with complex glow-plug preheating systems and used a robust gear-driven timing setup, it was an engine that asked for nothing and gave everything. It earned a legendary reputation for being bulletproof. Stories began to circulate of Transits that had skipped 5 oil changes and been driven through floods, only to keep on chugging. There is a famous account of a Transit in Spain that was buried under 16 feet of snow for an entire winter. When the thaw hit, the owner dug it out, turned the key, and it roared to life on the first attempt. It was the pinnacle of mechanical honesty, a machine built for the man who refused to be let down. The van even became an unlikely star of the natural world. In the 1960s, as part of a high-profile publicity stunt, a Transit was used to transport 2 baby elephants from a zoo. The van handled the massive, shifting weight of the pachyderms with the same ease it handled a load of gravel. In 1985, a group of students in Essex set a world record by cramming 48 people into a single, unmodified Ford Transit. These records are a testament to the van's blank canvas nature. Whether carrying students or elephants, the Transit proved it could be whatever the world needed it to be. For nearly half a century, the American landscape was dominated by a different kind of beast. The Ford E-Series, better known as the Econoline. It was a massive, thirsty, V8-powered monument to American excess, a body-on-frame dinosaur that defined the US workspace. But by the turn of the 21st century, it was a relic. It was heavy, cramped, and physically limited by an outdated design that prioritized engine displacement over intelligent space. The doghouse engine cover took up half the front cabin, making it an ergonomic nightmare. In 2014, Ford made a move that many industry insiders thought was a suicidal gamble. They retired the legendary Econoline and replaced it with the European-style unibody Transit. To the American contractor, this was a culture shock. They were used to the rumble of a V8 and a bonnet long enough to land a small plane on. But the maths were undeniable. The Transit offered more cargo space, better fuel economy, and a high roof option that allowed a 6-foot-tall worker to stand upright inside the van, something the old Econoline could never offer without a specialized conversion. It wasn't long before the Eurovan hadn't just entered the American market, it had completely redefined it. The Transit proved that efficiency was far more valuable than raw horsepower. Then came the Amazon effect. The explosion of e-commerce transformed the very anatomy of our streets. In a world of next-day delivery, the Transit became a primary cell in the global logistics network. Today, Ford's commercial vans account for roughly half of the full-size van market in the US alone. The Transit didn't just survive the transition to the new world, it conquered it. It became the physical infrastructure of the internet. Every time an algorithm processes a purchase, a Transit somewhere in the world begins its journey. It successfully replaced the American V8 workhorse, not by being louder, but by being smarter. It proved that the world van concept Henry Ford II had envisioned decades earlier was not just possible, it was inevitable. In 2026, the Ford Transit enters its 7th decade of service. With nearly 15 million built, its legacy isn't measured in metal, but in the lives it enabled, turning small ideas into global businesses and carrying the soundtracks of our youth. Today, that backbone is evolving. The iconic diesel clatter is giving way to the electric silence of the e-Transit, but the mission remains unchanged. From a rusted Mark I in 1960s London to a high-tech fleet in New York, it remains the ultimate symbol of honest work. Still here, still working, and still moving the world forward, one job at a time.